Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's legends and leaders, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. January Digital is a marketing leadership company solving business challenges through consulting, media excellence, and actionable analytics for some of the most innovative, growth-oriented brands in the country, including Carhartt, Kendra Scott, Strivectin, and Steve Madden. Made up of January Consulting and January Digital, they offer strategic leadership services and full-funnel media planning, execution, and optimization, leveraging data to provide insights, yielding client success. Bluecore's software solution turns anonymous online shoppers into known customers and repeat customers. Bluecore enables retailers to personalize and optimize their email, SMS, and site marketing campaigns by delivering targeted and relevant messages based on where every customer is in their journey. Bluecore replaces annoying high-volume messaging with high-value messaging. Customers include Alo Yoga, Neiman Marcus, and Gap. On today's flight of the Retail Pilot, we have legend Pete Nordstrom, President and Chief Brand Officer of Nordstrom. Throughout his career, Pete has helped Nordstrom innovate the customer shopping experience and redefine the role fashion plays in customers' lives, leading major strategic initiatives such as building the designer offering to a $1.5 billion business, evolving Nordstrom's mix of brands and categories, and bringing in limited distribution brands as exclusive partners. Since taking over leadership in 2000, Pete and his brothers grew the business from $5.1 billion to just over $15 billion, increased the number of stores by more than 200 locations, and opened Nordstrom's first flagship store in New York City as an experiential shopping destination. Driven by a Nordstrom principle to leave it better than we found it, they also led the organization to achieve 100% pay equity for employees, earn a spot on Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list for 20 years in a row, and set a target to give back more than $50 million in local communities where they do business by 2025. What an honor to have Pete Nordstrom on today's flight of the Retail Pilot. Pete, welcome.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate you inviting me.
Good to see you again. I think we first connected, might have been 10 years ago, maybe 11, when you were in New York City looking for the ultimate location to open up the Nordstrom flagship.
Was it that long ago? Yeah. It was quite an odyssey of years of us looking for the optimal location in New York. It took a long time and 2 generations of Nordstroms to settle that.
Well, we can thank our mutual friend, Derek Trolson, for bringing us together and finding the location.
That's right. Derek did an outstanding job. As you know, a friend of mine from Seattle, as we were working through this process, he said, we've got to have someone on the ground there that we know and we trust is not just trying to sell us something that, will act in our best interests. And Derek was the guy, and he did a great job for sure.
Kudos to DT. Pete, what age did you get into the family business and where did you start?
Well, I started really young, but it wasn't because there was some kind of scheme hatched about how I was going to get all these experiences and skills to develop me into being an executive at Nordstrom. It was just as simple as my dad saying, hey, it's summertime. You can't hang out and bug your mother all day. When I was your age, I was working. You guys need to work. So, we did the thing we could do. That was a job we could get, which was my dad bring us down to the store. So I was 12. It was the summer between the 6th and 7th grade. And he would bring us down to the store. I say us, my brother's right about my age. So it wasn't always us together, but he would bring us down. He would bring us, and I'll say at least in my case, brought me to the shoe department, the women's shoe department, and said, here's my kid. I'm going to be back in 8 hours. Put him to work. And so there was no HR involvement. There was no training. There was the department managers were happy to have me because I was free. My dad was paying me out of his pocket. So they were like, great, here's a broom. So I'm back there sweeping or doing some kind of stock work in the shoe department, stuff a 12-year-old was capable of doing. Upon reflection, I'm sure I wasn't very good at any of it. I remember those days feeling like really long days, kind of by myself doing a task in the back room. It was not very exciting, but it was a means to an end that I could make some money and, be busy during the summer. So that's how it started. As summers progressed and I got older, I started selling shoes when I was 16. The big catalyst there was my parents made it clear to me that they were not going to buy us stuff, and particularly a car. So if we wanted a car, which at least in those days, I mean, the minute you turned 16, you wanted access to a car, got your license, all that. So I was able to buy a car because I'd worked during the summers and I could save up some money. It wasn't a fancy, expensive car, but it was a car. So that was the whole thing. That was the means to end. Again, it wasn't about developing the fourth generation of Nordstrom's to run the business. And so it really, those were my summer jobs because it was a job I could get and it was a good job. Selling shoes, made good money. And by that time it was fun. You're around people that were contemporaries of yours and it was interesting and fun. And I did that going through college until with my English major that I was working on, figuring out what am I going to do with my life. And I figured I always liked work at Nordstrom. I understand what's the opportunity that's in front of me. My dad was a big influence on me. He seemed to really enjoy what he was doing. And I wasn't trying to run away from my family. I like my family. So that wasn't a negative. That was a positive to me. And I guess the last thing I'd say about it is I was a guy that played a lot of sports growing up, and being part of a retail organization like I was doing on the floor, selling part of a department, it felt like being on a team. And so it made a lot of sense to me. You show up every day, your department manager's like your coach. We're trying to sell things, which means we're trying to score points. You kind of keep score. There's an element of competition to it, and there's an element of teamwork to it. All that made a lot of sense to me, and I liked it. So when I graduated from college, I started right away. And I was the second assistant manager in women's shoes at our South Center store. It was not a glamorous start, but it was part of it. If I was going to do it, I was going to have to touch all the bases. And that was made pretty clear to me.
Ever a moment of doubt that you weren't going into the family business or something else you thought you might want to pursue?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, think about it. I don't think there's a lot of teenage boys in this country going, oh my God, my dream is to be a retailer. I mean, maybe there was, it wasn't mine. I thought like a lot of young people, I like sports, particularly basketball. I'm going to be a professional basketball player. And that seemed, well, of course. But, reality comes crashing down as you get older. And I played basketball. I enjoyed it and all that stuff, but it became clear, certainly by my mid-teens, no one was going to pay me money to play basketball. It wasn't going to be my profession. So that was my first thing. And then even when I was in high school, I felt like, well, maybe I'll be in business in some way, but I'm not sure Nordstrom, I really didn't have the intention that's what it was going to be. And people don't tend to believe it, but there was no expectation from my dad that I needed to be working at Nordstrom. He just wanted us to be working and productive and accountable and all the things any parent would want from their kid. So, I thought since I played basketball and I coached some basketball that maybe I would coach basketball then. But, again, the reality all comes together. Like I said, I thought there was a lot of great opportunity at Nordstrom. There was a lot of success and momentum, particularly in those days in the early 80s, and felt like an exciting place to be. And once I made the decision, I was all in, never looked back.
From women's shoes, take us through the rest of your career and bring us current.
Okay, so I started selling women's shoes, and the path was you could kind of see you become assistant manager, you become a department manager, become a buyer, you maybe become a merchandiser or a store manager, you could become a regional manager, become a corporate merchandising kind of person. So there was a path that I understood. And my thing was once I started, is like, well, if it's a promotion, I'll take it. And I realized that I was going to have to move because at that time our company was expanding all over the country and we promoted pretty much everyone internally, which the great thing is it created a lot of opportunity for young people. So I had big jobs young, but it was not unique to me. Everyone around did. It was just, things were happening. So I moved to California 2 different times and worked in Orange County, once as a shoe buyer, then once as a regional manager a few years later. But anyway, I managed departments. I bought women's shoes. I was a merchandiser for a group of buyers, kind of led them in a division at Nordstrom. I was a store manager at our Tacoma store in the Seattle area. I moved down to Southern California, Orange County, and I was the regional manager for all the stores there, which was a great experience. And I came back to Seattle when I was in my mid to late 30s. And then at that time, my dad and his cousins were thinking about retiring, and And they didn't think, and they were right, that we were old enough and ready to take on the whole company. And at that point, there were 6 of us in the 4th generation of Nordstroms, my 2 brothers and my 3 cousins. And so this idea was, okay, and we were all a similar trajectory in our career. Let's bring those guys in. Let's give them a big responsibility, but they're not going to be like the CEO or the president. They will report to someone. So my dad and his cousins elevated a couple people actually, to lead the company, and then we would report to them, and those guys would report to my dad and my uncle. So that went on for a while. We had different responsibilities, and the company was growing a lot. And then business started not going very well. And I had some cousins that decided, I don't think this is really what I want to be doing. They fired the person that was our boss, this person that was caught in kind of a horrible Nordstrom sandwich between my dad and uncles, and then my brothers and I. That wouldn't have been an easy job, I'm sure. And now by this time, we're late 30s, maybe 40. And so they fired that person. And then there was, as every public company would do, there was a search for the CEO. And I remember they were talking, like a person from Macy's, a person from Saks, a person from Neiman Marcus. And at the time, the number one candidate ended up being this guy from Neiman Marcus. And that was known to us. And by the way, I had a couple of cousins leave. So now it's just my 2 brothers and me. And they brought the guy in, and I think the board really liked him. And then I remember my dad and his cousins were like, no, this is not the guy. And so I don't know what the dynamics of that board meeting was, because we weren't on the board then. But essentially what happened was they said, well, why don't we give these guys an opportunity to do it? They said, well, it's not going to be all 3 of you. So we like on the spot, well, okay, Blake, you're the oldest one, so it's you. And we'll work together, but you can represent us with board and everything as leader. And so the board, in their infinite wisdom, decided to give us a shot. But the thing I most remember from that time, other than being really grateful for it, was the clarity brought to us around the fact that this is a public company. We are not entitled to be here based on what our name is. And if we do not do well, we will be gone. Are you clear about that? And we were like, yeah. And so rather than take it as kind of insulting or, not a vote of confidence, we took it as a real motivator that we did not want to be known as the first generation Nordstroms to screw it up. So, the company wasn't doing particularly well. It gave us opportunity to create a lot of focus, really boil it down to the key values and culture that we wanted. And we did it, and we had a really good trajectory of success the first several years we had the job. So it all worked out.
When you took on this role, who was doing what and why?
Yeah. Well, part of it is there was a model that was created by my dad and his cousins. And what they did is they would rotate what the president was. They operated as a group, and every different year or 2 years, the president, they just kind of rotated around, but they all had responsibilities were broad. They each had a merchandising division that they were responsible for. They each had like a region or 2, and then they each had an operational function. So my dad always had shoes. He may have had the Northwest region, and maybe he had HR and finance or something like that. It kind of got divided like that. So we thought that was a template perhaps for how we could do it, but we did it a little bit differently. I mean, once they said, okay, you got the job. Okay, Blake, you're the guy. I mean, this all took like a half hour. I swear, we sat there around a table. But Pete, you got merchandising, because I don't know whether that was at that time was something I was really super interested in, or I think we thought I might be the best suited for that, but it did suit me, and I was happy to have it. If he got merchandising, Blake says, I'll take kind of like the corporate stuff. So, stuff like finance, all that, report to me. I'll deal with the board, blah, blah, blah. Eric, you got all stores. That was it. And those were days pre-internet. So it was a much simpler business. We had one channel. We had the rack business, but it was small, and it was really a subset of whatever we were doing in the full line stores. So that's how it started. And it essentially stayed that way for 20 years. And we worked as a group. We were a team, an equal team, certainly internally how we operated. Eric and I got elevated to the board in, I think, 2005, if I remember correctly. And so then 3 of us were on the board since then. And that's how it went, really, until my brother passed away.
It's interesting. I started my career at Macy's, and similar to what you were doing, though certainly my success trajectory falls well short of yours. But they were
You've done some interesting things, Ken. You've had some big jobs.
They were very focused on moving their employees from store line to buying line and really creating a very broad operating experience, which was truly a value. Yeah, I think back, as you mentioned, the online wasn't around then, but had it been, that would have been another channel to grow up in that I missed out on. And you missed out on that as well.
Yeah, I certainly missed out on kind of my development years as I was going through. But when I said it wasn't around, I mean, it was nascent though. I mean, it was only a year or two old. We had a catalog business that was not huge that we essentially said, well, this will be our internet business. And that was right at the time when Eric Blake and I got our responsibility around 2000, right?
Right.
And so, but it was also new that it was in a lot of ways a bit of an afterthought because it was small.
But I'm
Remember
wondering,
people used to talk about online as, oh, is it your biggest store? I mean, it's 40% of our business now. I mean, it's way past our biggest store. But in those days, it was like the size of a store, whatever it is we were doing online.
I think we were all trying to figure it out then. I was at Gap and I was actually given the online business to launch it because I
Wow.
was the entrepreneur. I was the resident entrepreneur. If there was something to be built, it seemed to come my way. I launched the outlet while I was with Gap and took it from 0 to 100 stores. I had that opportunity. So when online was first rolling out, they said, throw it at Ken. It wasn't
And
a
were you
tech.
working for Mickey at that time?
I worked for Mickey for a number of years.
Ah,
In fact, I worked for
big time.
Mickey right up until the time I left the company to go be CEO at J. Crew. And then Mickey decided to come to J. Crew. And well, suffice it to say, I didn't work for Mickey again.
Yeah.
So, but we had a great run together. But it was just very interesting how, I guess, merchants, and I consider myself, you, a merchant, how we were brought up really to understand the different disciplines of the business and how important that really was and is to me today to have a much broader view and appreciation specifically for stores, which I think people today don't necessarily grow up thinking about as so much happens online or in the digital era, but so much is still happening in stores. And obviously 60% of your business is still coming out of the stores.
Well, I mean, it's interesting how you phrase that because, I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of young people or ambitious people that want to know how to get to head at Nordstrom. And young people tend to always have this view of, I'm looking for some kind of shortcut. I'm looking for some kind of magic silver bullet that's going to get me in a big job. And what I tell everybody is you're valuable to a company because of the experiences that you've had. And you're not well served to shortcut those experiences or not have them. So the best thing you can do is a lot of different things and build up an appreciation for enterprise, how a company like ours works. Because if you're going to end up having a real big leadership job here, you got to figure out how to stitch it together, not how you're operating in a silo around a specialty. And, people don't tend to like that advice. Again, they're looking for the quick, easy shortcut. But we have, I think a good track record of being able to develop people that have had a lot of different experiences. And by the time they have big jobs, they're battle tested. They know what they're doing.
Interesting also, Pete. I mean, Nordstrom known for many things, but probably one of the things I think of most is loyalty and customer service. I mean, the one story that was circulating around Gap when I was there was how you guys took back a tire in one of your stores. I was like, they don't even sell automotive parts. Didn't matter. Nordstrom took back a tire. Building a business around the customer first and service seems to be an art that has maybe been lost, certainly on many, and younger people growing up today don't really think much about customer service because there isn't much when you're shopping online.
Well, I mean, first of all, the tire story is true. I don't know if you have time for all that now, but actually, you may notice I have a podcast called The Nordy
14.
Pod. So episode 14 of The Nordy Pod, it's entitled The Tire Story is True. And that whole story gets told. Matter of fact, I was able to track down the person that took back the tire 40 years later, or whatever it was. So it's a great story. But that's true. But your point about service and online, a big wake up call for us is anytime there was some kind of poll or survey about who gave the best service, ever since I was around from the early 80s on, Nordstrom was always right around the top of that list. But it was always super high touch companies like, oh, it's the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, or it's Hertz Rent-A-Car, and it's Nordstrom, and these super high touch person to person things. But what ended up happening by the time 2000 came along, if you look at those same top 10 lists, all of a sudden, like Amazon's up there and Netflix is up there, purely digital businesses. Well, the first thing we did was like, well, but they don't give good service. And so we were dismissive of it. But at the same time, the whole market was changing. And the realization is if you're going to be grounded in the customer and customer service as your top thing, customers define what good service is, not us. And what we learned is customers increasingly define good service by speed and convenience. So we had to be able to do both, right? We had to have the high touch thing that wasn't necessarily about speed or convenience, but we also had to be able to do a transactional thing extremely well that was respectful of the customer's time and make things simple and easy for them. But there's a store version of that and there is an online version of that. And I think that's been the challenge. It's got to work on multiple fronts if you, in fact, want to have customer centricity and make them the catalyst for whatever it is that you're doing. It's not easy, and it evolves in terms of what customers really value.
In addition to service, you have been personally very focused on the brand part of the business. I know for quite some time, Nordstrom had looked and considered and even purchased a few brands. I believe you purchased Fastenab back in the day when that was hot, and a couple of other brands along the way. You were also very instrumental in recognizing D2C brands at their early stage and giving them an opportunity to present their product in stores. Talk to us a little bit more about your focus on building brands at Nordstrom and where you're taking it going forward.
Yeah, the acquisition part of brands is something that we did it a little bit. Like the Fastenab thing was an example. We had it. We could kind of lock it up and own it. It was really big for us. So it made a lot of sense to do that. But we also learned through that. I mean, owning a French brand based out of France and trying to figure out design, production, wholesaling, logistics. I mean, it was just too difficult and it really wasn't our core competency. So I think we learned, well, to carry a brand and to do a great job with it, we don't have to own it. We can create a relationship. We're a great partner. So we learned that. And typically what you've seen around here is not necessarily growth through acquisition, but much more organic. There are some things we have done, but I wouldn't consider it a core competency or strategy for us, acquisition. The D2C part really is an outcome of what I said before. You don't have to own these brands or lock them up exclusively to be able to do business, but you have to be able to present them with a compelling reason why we would be a good partner. And so I spend a lot of my time and have over the years engaged in the merchandising subject, interact with brands saying, how can we be more important to you? What problems do we need to solve together? And the fact is, there's a lot. Everyone's just trying to get the best stuff in front of a good audience, a customer set that is compelling to them. So we have 30 million some odd customers. They're loyal customers. They're affluent. They're aspirational. They're into fashion. They're everything that the brands kind of want. And so our approach with all these brands is like, hey, you may not want to sell a bunch of retailers, but you're probably going to need somebody because going it on your own is really tough and it's expensive, right? I mean, you've seen this, Ken. I mean, brands have this great arc and they're hotter than a pistol and they get to about $300 million maybe. And then it's like, well, now where we go? Well, we got to open up a bunch of stores or we've got to invest in a lot more marketing or we've got to expand to other categories. And then that becomes more complicated and more risky and expensive and time consuming. So what we'll tell brands is like, look, you've got this thing going on and we're not particularly good at creating a brand, but we are really good at amplifying a brand that has some buzz and making it bigger and better and well known. So we just tell people, if you just sold us and all of a sudden you're online with Nordstrom and you're in 90 stores, that is a great billboard for people to discover your brand. And then over time, they may end up deciding they like the brand so much they go directly, and that's fine. It all kind of works. And we have all kinds of great evidence about how that rising tide lifts all boats. It's good for them. It's good for us. So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you said that. It has become a key, I think, strategy for us in terms of how we interact with brands about how we can be beneficial to each other. It's great when we can get a buzzy D2C brand that's not ubiquitously distributed out there. That's a great thing for us. And we have some really good examples that I'll use a few just right off the top of my head. So if you look at our on-running business, I mean, a couple of years ago, that was they were in some running specialty stores, but they were big time D2C business. I mean, that business is really big for us. It's a top 10 vendor for us. I mean, 4 years ago, it was like nowhere. So that grew really fast. Skims would be another one. They were 100% D2C business. So they started working with us. They now sell Saks, but we're their biggest retail partner by quite a bit. And that thing, I mean, I've been doing this a long time. That may be the single hottest brand I've ever seen. And then you've got like Viore. I don't know if you're familiar with that
Sure.
brand, active brand. It's a really good one. But when I met with Joe, he goes, yeah, I don't really know if we want to be in a store like yours. I think we just want to be vertical. And, we talked about it and it's been good for him. Their business is growing like crazy. It's been really good here. I think we've elevated the profile of what that brand is. A ton of customers have discovered it through us, and that's been good for them and it's good for us. So we're going to keep going on that formula. We like it.
Pete, are any of the brands that you're working with shop in shops or actually paying for the space and doing a bit of a rev share on the productivity, or is it strictly a wholesale retail relationship?
Most of what we do is wholesale, but I will tell you over time, we've become increasingly agnostic about financial arrangement because at the end of the day, a customer doesn't care. They just want to buy what they want to buy in an environment they want to buy it with good service. So we need to solve for that stuff on the back end. And I think that's what I'm talking about. When we have a discussion with the brand, like, let's think about a model that's going to work for us both. But most of the concession or unowned inventory models have been in the designer part of the business and luxury part of the business. And it really wasn't that long ago, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. It's like, that's something we almost never did. I mean, I remember my dad and his cousins saying, no way. We are not landlords. We are retailers. There is no way we're doing that. And then it just became a cold reality to me and to us. Like, if we don't play the game the way they want to play, we're not going to have that distribution. And frankly, it works great. I mean, we've got several models with designer brands that are unowned models. We got a handful of concessions, people like LV, and they'll only do concessions. Chanel's gone that way, but those are really good businesses and they're worth having. And then I would say, with online, we've done a lot of drop ship, but then there's going to also be marketplace models where we can expand our choice count because we have unowned models and we have enough versions of that unknown model thing out there. It comes up all the time in our discussions with brands. Like, well, there's a menu of things we can do. What's the best thing for us both? And those are great discussions to have. So yeah, I mean, I think the nature how business is done. I mean, think about it, Ken, when you and I started, unless you were vertical, and there weren't a ton of them, there was only one way. There were wholesale brands and there were retailers. And it was all done in a physical store. You bought some stuff, you put it in the store and they sold it. And that's just the way it was. And that has completely changed because all the brands can go direct to customer, right? If they so choose. They're not only just brands, they're retailers, right? So yeah, the whole thing is really just changing. A lot of those brands that used to be really populate kind of the better part of our business, that those department store brands that were really like pillars, so many of those are gone. And so it's being replaced by private label or, what have you. So the business has changed a lot over the years.
I work with a number of early stage companies and love to look at their model. And many of these companies start off as D2C. I've had a number of discussions over really the past couple of years about being more of an omni player and looking at wholesale as another key channel because there's no better way or faster way outside of online to physically get your product in front of a customer than putting it in stores near a customer.
Yeah, if you see Nordstrom's got 30 million customers, and that's a profile of exactly who we want to get to. It's probably the most cost-effective way to get it because, as you know, online marketing's got really expensive. What you have to do to build out a logistics network to serve customers in a great way, in a 360 way, D2C, which, by the way, will include physical stores and stuff, that's expensive. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of infrastructure. So, yeah, I mean, it should be part of a recipe that works. And at least for us, it does.
My thought on it also is, as you mentioned, a great opportunity to get the right customer. It's also, if you can do a shop in shop and create a store environment from a CapEx point of view, you're never going to get that opportunity again. Now, not every brand is going to be able to garner a shop in shop within a department store or within a Nordstrom. But depending on where you are in your growth trajectory, you may have some leverage and an opportunity.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that Nordstrom really does give brands an opportunity to grow. And look, you have about 100 regular price stores, and it feels like the right distribution, the right amount relative to the size of the country. And if you even take it one step further, an engagement with the banner Nordstrom will actually help probably increase the value of your product at the rack. Because the better product is known, the greater the value there is to product in the off-price channel. If in fact the brand ever does have a problem or excess inventory, not that that ever happened. So it's a relationship.
Every brand has stuff at the end of the season they can't sell. So
It,
I think we're a necessary part of that ecosystem. But I think you're exactly right, Ken. I mean, I would say though, when you talk about shop and shops, you don't see a lot of it in our physical store because at the end of the day, we're still a multi-brand store. And while we may have some unknown models, we don't have a ton of like three-walled shops. Almost all of them are LVMH or carrying brand.
yeah.
I mean, that's for Chanel. That's almost all of them. So we're not really interested in going, there's the European and kind of the Asian model where retailers have become much more like landlords and less like multi-brand retailers. And
Yeah, especially
evolve, but we're not 100% opposed to it. But to your point about they've got to be productive enough to warrant it. And so we'll say, okay, great. You want a three-walled shop? You've got to do $10,000 a foot or, whatever it is. And they're like, oh, we can't do that. I go, well, then we can't do it. So we have those discussions all the time. They'll say, well, why don't you treat us more like Chanel? Well, they're Chanel. They're $10,000 a foot or more, whatever it is. It's noticeable the difference of the productivity of a brand like that. And when you have a brand like that, you've got to flex and treat them differently.
Pete, if there is a startup brand that wants to be in Nordstrom, what's the best way for them to go about connecting with Nordstrom?
I mean, we get connected to brands all the time from all different ways. I mean, I still get people who reach out to me. They may say, I met this guy, Ken Pilot. He said, you guys do this. He gave me your email address. And who could you introduce me into the shoe division? Because we got the shoe line. That stuff happens a lot.
So I just funnel everything to you, Pete. Got it.
Look at Ken, I trust you. And you probably, if you're sending it my way, I'm going to pay attention to that because that's probably worth talking about. But a lot of it just happens very organically. And if you've got people that are in those markets and part of that world, they're exposed to a lot of things. And a big part of our thing is we try to do two things. We try to edit down because value is really concentrated. You want to do a big job with fewer people. You don't want to be a mile wide and an inch deep. But then at the same time, you don't want to cut off the tail that lends to discovery because we just talked about three brands that if we were talking about them 5 years ago, they could have been considered the tail, and maybe we'll edit them out. But if we edited that out, we wouldn't have On, we wouldn't have Skims, we wouldn't have Viore, and that would make us a boring store. So there's a formula and a balance to this that really matters. But I guess what I would say, Ken, is people get to us in all kinds of organic ways. And my response to our merchant team is like, look, our responsibility is to be curious and listen. Doesn't mean you have to buy it. I'm not going to make you buy anything you don't want to buy, but you should listen at least to what they have to say and see what they have and then make a decision if you want it or not.
Pete, how often would a brand actually come to you via online and then end up in the store? Is that also a potential path to being in a Nordstrom store?
It may be the best path because think about it, Ken. I mean, online, it's not necessarily about curation. It's about choice count. And so we have a lot more latitude to bring things in and try stuff online, particularly because it also lends itself a little bit more to unknown models. So it's not a huge risky proposition for us to have that. In a store, you're bound by, literal physical limitations of space. And so it's much more about curation. So a brand may come to us and say, gosh, we're great. And here we are in men's sports. And I said, well, there's about 5 brands that do a version of what you do. And we can't carry 6. So unless you can do something better, different, whatever, than one of these, you're not going to make the cut. So it is harder to get into a store, but it's not possible. Again, the whole lifeblood of this business is not about locking into a bunch of brands from the past. It's about making sure you're tapped into what's going on now and what's coming, what's new, because that's what makes a place relevant. And we want to be viewed as a modern and relevant place.
You mentioned the digital marketplace, which you're launching in April and leaning into unowned inventory, a model I love. I wish I had that model when I was a buyer because I'm trying to figure out how you calculate GM ROI on marketplace product. It's like mailbox money. It just shows up. I don't know if you can share, but I'm going to ask.
Okay.
Roughly, what % of the online business is marketplace?
Well, we're not there yet, but you mean unknown models?
Unowned. I'm sorry. Unowned. Correct.
Okay. That's a really good question because we do a pretty big drop ship business right now. I don't know. I mean, the honest answer, I don't know if I should give you the answer, but the honest answer is I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you it's fairly significant. And part of that, it gets back to you working with a brand. They want a shot. We may say, if you want a shot, this is your shot. We can get you online. We can do this thing. And it's a vehicle by which we can discover new brands. And I think if you're a brand out there, you'd be wise to figure out how to make it easy for people and not make it hard.
I love the model. I think it's, certainly on the retail side, on the buy side, it's great because just not loading up with inventory provides you great flexibility, provides the customer more choice, and actually can lead to great discovery and potentially get your product into a store. So I'm always telling brands that are out there, don't walk away from the marketplace model. It may not be as great financially as having a purchase order written and seeing some cash up front. In fact, sometimes the retailers can pay, happens, Pete, slowly. It could be a 60-day term on something that you've already sold.
Yes. I know that's an issue.
Not pointing fingers at you, just hearing things around the space. But it's a great model, certainly for retailers, but it does put a lot of pressure on brands to own that inventory and maintain a service level that's critically important to the retailer and the customer. So that's a real tricky part of it because the inventory's got to be there, even though the retailer hasn't necessarily bought it.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we need to share in the risk. And so it doesn't work if the brand is trying to offload all the risk on us or vice versa. And so again, that gets back to when you're sitting across the table from a brand, we want to make it more about a partnership and less about a negotiation or a transaction. I mean, there is a transactional nature to it for sure. But if you want to build a long lasting and growing success, it's really going to be when it's most often the spirit of partnership. And then the other thing I would say is, sometimes brands say, yeah, we want to do this, but we need a physical space. We need a shop. And that's like, well, if you can come in day one and be this productive, let's talk about it. But you shouldn't just say, well, then I'm not coming. I mean, to the point you made, you're well served to use this channel in a way, again, that benefits the brand to get more eyeballs on your brand, to have discovery be a part of it, to actually introduce folks to your brand in a way that may drive them to your own site. That's okay too. We can be a vehicle for that.
Speaking of introducing customers to the brand, I was reading through the annual report. I thought it was interesting to note that one of the key roles the rack plays, besides generating about a third of total sales, is appealing to a new customer. 40% of customer acquisition at Nordstrom's comes through the rack stores. How are you thinking about the rack going forward relative to the banner brand?
Yeah, a couple things. I think we, in some ways, limited the growth and the possibilities of the rack because there was some inherent idea that we wanted to have appropriate proportionality between full line and rack. And might that be confusing if the rack got disproportionately larger? But over time, what you've seen, Ken, I mean, we're in a tough industry. But if you look at the most successful retail vehicle in our industry, it's off price. So and I can't remember, it was a board meeting a few years ago. One of our board members said, well, what if we just kind of went with the rack? Like, let if we didn't put any restrictions on, but let it grow organically based on demand and interest from customers. And they're like, well, that seems like a good idea. Of course. And that's really what we've done. So, we've got 265 rack stores, 270 maybe. I don't know. We're opening quite a few now. TJ Maxx has 2,800 stores in the US. I don't know. I mean, our average price point is higher than theirs, but what if we had 500 rack stores? And by the way, we also have rack.com. So what if we just let that thing seek its own level? And that is super promising for us and probably the best single growth vehicle if you're looking for the rack just purely as of what it is. But when you talk about the Nordstrom brand and the ecosystem that we have, it is true that we introduce more new customers to the rack channel than any other thing that we do. So customer acquisition is a really important element to what we're trying to do. And it seems maybe counterintuitive, but most of our most productive rack stores and most productive full line stores are right next to each other. So they don't cannibalize. They bring more people to the party, which is great. We're not trying to put our stores out in remote locations where they can't possibly overlap with each other. That doesn't make any sense. We're trying to create more market share. We're trying to create a better ecosystem that works all the way around for customers. And lots of customers like to shop both channels, just kind of depending what their need state is. They like the rack and they like Nordstrom, and we generally have the same brands there. It's aligned. It makes a lot of sense. So we're very optimistic about the growth potential of the rack.
Looking at stores, I noticed, and maybe I read the information incorrectly, but will the new Nordstrom stores be closer to 35, 40,000 feet? And I'm referring to the banner stores, or is that specifically rack size going forward?
Yeah, the rack stores are more like 25,000, 30,000 feet. A Nordstrom full line store is anywhere from 110,000 to 350,000, 400,000 feet. So
Yeah,
we don't have, like Bloomie's has that small format. We don't have that. We've done things like that in the past. Didn't work particularly well for us, but physical locations are important. But when we have a Nordstrom store, we want it to the best of our abilities to reflect what the Nordstrom brand is and not like Nordstrom Light. And it's hard to do that because you go to their New York stores, like, wow, look at that. Then you may show up at a store in St. Louis or something. And like, oh my God, it's not like that. And
it's
so,
interesting. I thought that going forward, you would continue to be 150 to 200,000 for a Nordstrom store, for a banner store, and smaller store formats for the rack. It is of note that Macy's is moving towards a smaller store format, being more tightly merchandised on the regular price level, around 35,000
yeah.
feet. And maybe Bloomie's will follow suit. So didn't know if that was something that's in your playbook, but it doesn't sound like it is, at
Well, it's
least
not
not for the
now.
banner.
I mean, I wouldn't dismiss anything. These are interesting ideas. And there's a Bloomies, which they call those small format stores not far from us here in Seattle. We've all visited several times. Very curious how that's all going to work. And, if that recipe really works for them, we should be curious about it for sure.
You look at last year, tougher year for Nordstrom, dropping almost 6% total sales, but some real standout businesses within active, beauty, I think footwear as well. And you start to think maybe about the store of the future. What do you want to lean into? And what do you want to pull away from? Some categories, I guess it's a cyclical business, but some categories, mostly women's, seem to just trend well over time. Men's, I think we tend to bring down the group because we just don't shop quite as much. But you do wonder if the small store overall has more potential than the big store. You can probably have more of them, keep the customer touch point, great for distribution, getting product to the customer faster. But you do lose that overarching experience, and you certainly can't replicate the New York experience in 35,000 feet.
I think the important thing is to look at the major markets that we're trying to serve. If you look at the top 25 markets, whatever, we're in all those places. We're in all the A malls. So the question is, do you need 4 stores in that market to service it? Or do you need 2 really good ones? Or, we're kind of looking at that because the whole end game for us is not about stores just vis-a-vis specifically stores, but it's how it serves the customer in a market as an opportunity to be able to connect physical spaces with online capabilities. And because, you can buy online, you can pick up in store. Most of the returns from online, but people want to return, they return them in store, not because we send them there. That's what they choose to do. And so us having convenient physical locations, and by the way, the racks can also serve as that too, which helps. And you can have a lot more of those. But we're just looking at, again, the whole ecosystem, how it works end to end way. And if we're going to have a full line store, we want it to be really good. I could be wrong and it could evolve, but in the near term, I don't think that's our playbook. I think, we've got 93 full line stores right now. Feels pretty good. I don't see us having a bunch more, at least, in the US. If anything, we've closed some because, just as time's gone on, first of all, there's not much new development. You don't see new development where, retailers like us are in there. There's more strip mall and things that happen on a smaller scale, which lends itself to the rack. But there's not these places where they're traditional malls or even downtown environments where it makes as much sense. So I don't know. We need to do a good job for our shareholders. Stores are expensive. They're costly to run. And, if you're going to do them, you got to do them well or it's a drain for sure.
Canada wasn't, I guess, the best thing that happened to Nordstrom. You're done with Canada for now. Is there any other international opportunity, or are you going to focus on the US?
Well, I'll tell you, having to close Canada was the single most painful, difficult decision that I've been a part of in my 25 years doing this job. It was really exciting to go there. We had a lot of really great early success. Vancouver was always really successful. but we couldn't make it work in its entirety. It's not unique to us. There's been a long history of U.S. brands have not been able to crack that nut and be able to do business in Canada. And when COVID came along, we had to make a lot of tough decisions. We're staring down the barrel. Well, maybe it'll be pretty good in 5-10 years. And that maybe and hopefully thing was not good enough for us. But it was really difficult. It was painful having to tell the employees. It was painful dealing with the brands that, the landlords, the customers, all of it. So you say, well, that's a good thing that we closed. I guess in some ways it was a good thing we closed it, but it's hard for me to get my mind around that was a good thing. Felt terrible. But I would agree that we're in a better place in terms of our ability to be able to drive more to the bottom line, to not have as many kind of empty calories. We're able to solve this business, but we're not able to bring it to the bottom line. Again, we're a public company. Top line's great, but if you got to figure out how to make money too. So we're always doing that calculus and trying to figure it out. And hopefully we don't have more examples of a big failure like that. It wasn't fun. But your question, what other opportunities does that suggest for us in the future? Think about it, Ken. There is not one department store in the world that has been able to replicate success in a different country. Not one. So we'd like to think we could, but there's a lot of hubris there. I don't think we can. Maybe we can't. At least if we couldn't do it in Canada, I'm not sure we could do it anywhere else. But, we're part of an international department store group and that stuff gets talked about. But you don't see Selfridges in the U.S. You don't see, Saks and Bloomingdale's, they've done some franchise stuff in the Middle East. I don't know, maybe that works for them. I don't know. But there's really almost no examples of anyone being able to go and replicate and grow a successful business in a different country. So I think the best thing we can do is be the best darn retailer in the U.S. That's what we're trying.
I'd drink to that, Pete. There's a big enough market here. A couple more things before we wrap. Like you decided to start a podcast. What inspired you to start a podcast, Pete? The Nordy.
Well, I think that the bar was low in terms it's not hard to do. It doesn't require a whole bunch of capital investment, and it was easy to do. And our thing is if we can find more connection points with customers, that's a good thing. And so we went through quite a process of deciding how it would be, and our marketing people really involved. And I got a good buddy of mine who's a movie director and that shows and podcasts too. And his thing is like, look, podcasts only work if it feels like it's a real conversation between two people that someone gets to listen into and not like some scripted thing where you're trying to sell somebody something. And that made a lot of sense to me. So we just kind of went with it and said, well, I got a microphone. I've got a couple people that help me here at Nordstrom, and I'm just going to talk to people I know about stuff I'm interested in, largely related to our business, but not entirely, and just see what happens. And it's been popular. It's done really well and people like it. And it's been fun for me. It's not a heavy lift. I have a new episode every 2 weeks. If you do it like what we're doing here, Ken, like we know each other, we can spend an hour doing this. And it's fun for me to talk to you. I learned stuff. It might be interesting for people because it's a real conversation between two people that know each other. That seems interesting.
I love how you focus on product, on people, the Nordstrom community. It ties together. It's very cohesive. I think you do a great job.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Look, I'm certainly not trained to do this. And so maybe that's one of the things that makes it work is like when there's a naivete to it, like, well, let's just go do it. And it's, kind of warts and all. Maybe that's what makes it real is maybe what makes it good. We did talk about one point, maybe we should get a professional host and all that stuff. Maybe it'd be better with professional host. We're going to keep going for now, though.
Yeah. But if you were to go back to 2000, let's just pick a year, start of online, et cetera. Any strategies you would have implemented or changed? Anything different?
I don't think so because there was no crystal ball for any of this, which actually is what made it fun and interesting. We weren't just running a legacy playbook. We had to think about a new playbook and we had to evolve. So a lot of that was really interesting, challenging at times. I don't really know. I don't really have any regrets about that. I don't know what I would do differently. I do think if I could go back in time, the things I've learned over the last 25 years, I would have been a lot better leader back then if I had some of those things. And that's, the curiosity I think you need to keep things going, understanding how important it is to have, particularly in a big company, but be able to be agile and be nimble. We learned that through COVID. It was painful that we couldn't pivot fast. We were big and it was hard. So I think trying to keep the company So it feels like it's got the vitality and the nimbleness of a smaller company, but with the leverage and the power of a big company. I mean, maybe I didn't fully appreciate that 25 years ago, but those are things that I think we would have been well served to figure out how to get in front of it so we were more agile, more flexible.
Pete, we're going to conclude today's flight of the retail pilot a little differently. Instead of ending with rapid fire, I want to share with our listeners your passion for music. And those of you that don't know, Pete's been in a band probably as long as he's been in retail, maybe longer, and has a band named Stag. Here are a few tunes from Stag.
That's in your hand. Feel the singer that's in your band. Stand around, but don't take a stand. Let it go, 'cause don't you understand? And I know, and I know, and I know, and I know that the lights are bright and the volume is low. And I know, and I know, and I know, and I know that it gets so hard when there's nowhere to go. Trauma, a broken steel. Pull the reins, don't give a damn. Let it go, but hold it, don't lose it. Yeah, tonight we got no rules to follow. I'm gonna drink till our heads are hollow. Do it all again tomorrow. Well, alright, long as you're right here with me, we'll defy gravity again. We got it all, we got it all. We got it all, we got it all. Feel the splinter that's in your hands. Feel the singer that's in your band. Stand around, but don't take a stand. Let it go, 'cause don't you understand? We got it all.